be finished with homework 2. And that's what I will recommend. Don't wait until the day before it's due. You should be working on it, doing a couple problems every day. Homework 2 should be done already. All right, so go ahead and glue down the cutout. So interval notation is just another way to show an interval. So the main thing to keep in mind is that any time that it was not equal to, we use, sorry, let me go back. So we use parentheses. For these two inequalities. And that's what you'll see. Notice that here it says A is less than X is less than B. Notice how we use parentheses. But when we add that equal to, that's when we change it to a bracket. And that's really all that there is to it. It's nothing too complicated. You should have all seen this before in Algebra 2. I know. I realized that after. I was like, what am I even trying to say? There we go. We use the bracket for equal to. You know, this is my 5th period class, so, you know, I got to figure out what to say. Y'all first, so. Poor 5th period. Okay. The other thing to keep in mind is that for anytime we do interval notation, is always smallest number first. Smallest, and then we get to the largest. So the reason why that's important is because whenever we talk about a less than, for these two, this says less than and this says less than or equal to. Notice that we start with negative infinity. Because if it's less than, it's coming from negative infinity. But if it's a greater than one of these two, we end with a positive infinity. All right, any questions so far? All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Go ahead and copy these 4 down, and we're just going to write it in interval notation. We're going to write these 4 intervals using interval notation. And then we're going to practice solving inequalities, and then we'll be done. A9 is a short one. I think what I'm going to do tomorrow, because I got a few people later in 6th and 7th that need to take the skills check. What I'm going to do is tomorrow, I'm just going to work out the skills check and have it on the whiteboard for those of you. You can, so just hold on to it, and then you'll be able to grade it tomorrow. So I'm trying to think, because we don't really have enough time to go through it because, you know, we just don't. Okay, so when we're looking at this one, this means that our solutions are between 0 and 4, but the 0 and the 4 are included. So that means that, notice how these two are equal to. What am I going to use, a bracket or a parentheses? What do you think? A bracket. So this would be written as bracket 0, 4 bracket. 0 comes first because 0 is smaller than 4. For question number 2, I'm going to go ahead and graph it. This is my number line. So what this is saying is, and I'm going to say this is 8. 8 will get an open circle. And because this is greater than 8, it will go to the right. So when I write this in interval notation, I would have a parentheses on the 8 because that's my start. And what is it going to? The arrow never ends, but it's going towards what number? Infinity. So that's why it's 8 to infinity. So we got a sideways 8 and an upside 8. Infinity and negative infinity always gets a parentheses. You never put a bracket on infinity. All right, go ahead and copy down 3 and 4 if you haven't already. X is greater than -1, but less than and equal to +2. So one side gets a bracket and the other side would get a parentheses. So that's how you would write that. Notice -1 got a parentheses because it's not equal to -1, and 2 would get a bracket. Question 4 says X is less than 3. So on a number line, again, this is negative infinity, this is positive infinity. We'll say 3 is here. We will have a closed circle on the 3, and it's less than. Less than means it's coming from the left. So the smallest number in this interval would be negative infinity, and it goes towards 3. So you would write it as negative infinity, and then 3 would get a bracket. Again, you can look at that cutout that you have anytime it's a less than. So these two here, if you want to write that, these two are less than. And these two are your greater than. All right, any questions about writing the interval? So for homework 3, this takes you what, 5 seconds. Go ahead and start it today. Don't wait until tomorrow. All right, so now let's start solving equations, or inequalities, I should say. So I'm gonna give you a minute to copy down. We'll just do one at a time because I don't know how much space it's gonna take you. So go ahead and copy that down, and then we're going to solve it. So we're going to solve it. It's an inequality because it doesn't have an equal sign. The main thing to keep in mind is when you multiply or divide both sides by a negative, you have to flip it. So that's the only thing you have to keep in mind when you're solving an inequality. So I'm going to solve it, and then we can graph it. I think it asks you to graph it in the homework. So let's go ahead and work through this first one together. First, you're going to distribute that 2, which is going to give you 2 minus 12a plus 7 is less than or equal to 93. So I distributed the 2. And now what do you think I'm going to do? Add your like terms. So that would be positive 2 and positive 7. Positive 2 and positive 7 equal 9. So that would be negative 12a plus 9 is less than or equal to 93. And now we're going to subtract the 9 from both sides. So negative 12a is less than or equal to 86, 84. And now you're going to divide both sides by negative 12. So I'm dividing by a negative, so I have to flip that inequality. So it's not going to be a less than anymore. It's going to flip and become greater than and equal to. Anytime you divide both sides divide or multiply both sides by a negative, you flip it. So go ahead and take 84 I think it's 7, -7, but let me verify. Yep. So A is greater than or equal to -7. So we need to write that in interval notation. So I'm going to graph it first. So -7 on my number line would be right here. It would get a closed circle. And it's greater than, so that means that it's going to the right. So it's going towards infinity. So my interval would be a bracket -7, comma, infinity. This is how I need that solution to be written when you, I think your next skill check is, I don't know if it might be, it's probably this week. Wait, okay, because your first test is next week. So yeah, you have another skill check this week. It's on Skyward. I mean on Canvas. I don't remember the day. So -7 to infinity would be the answer I'm looking for. Any questions? The skills check is going to cover, and I'll tell you more about that. I think it says it on Canvas. I think it's Appendix 7 and Appendix 9. Okay, let's go ahead and copy this second one down if you haven't already. Take a couple minutes and solve it. Solve it for B. All right, let's look at it. Step number 1, distribute that -6. So that's going to give you -3b plus 24 is greater than -12b minus 30. So did you all add 12 or add b? Which one did you all do? Did you add 12b or add 3b? Who added 12b? Who added 3b? Okay, well, you could do it either way at this point, but for an inequality, I like to keep my variable on the left, and I'll explain why in a minute. So I'm going to add the 12b, which is going to give me 9b plus 24 is greater than -30. And then I'm going to subtract the 24. which gives me 9b is greater than negative 54. And then when I divide by 9, I get that b is greater than negative 6. So on my number line, I have an open circle. Open circle on the negative 6, and it's greater than, so it's going to the right. So it would be a parentheses, negative 6 to positive infinity, close your parentheses. And that's how I will want the answer on the test. Any questions about that? I can't hear you. That's a good question. So why didn't I flip the sign for this one? Did I divide by a negative 9 or a positive 9? Positive. You only flip it when you're dividing by a negative. All right, couple more questions and we're done for today. Go ahead and copy down these two. I try to pick some that look kind of hard, like with a lot of distributing and stuff. Go ahead and copy. I think the ones in the homework might not even be this complicated. But go ahead and copy down these two. These are our last two. Zero is the real number, guys. Like, you can actually get zero as your answer. See, it's on the number line, zero. It's real. Let's go ahead and work through it together. So the first step would be to distribute that negative 4. And when I distribute the negative 4, then I'll have negative 8 plus 6n is less than or equal to negative 4n minus 8. And then what I did next was I added 4n to both sides, which gave me negative 8 plus 10n is less than or equal to negative 8. And then when I add the 8, I get that 10n is less than or equal to 0. And then I divide both sides by 10. N is less than or equal to 0. So it's less than or equal to 0. So 0 would get a closed circle. And it's less than, so it's going to go to the left. So that means my interval is starting with negative infinity. So parentheses, negative infinity to 0. And what would I put on 0? A parentheses or a bracket? A bracket. All right, last one. Go ahead and finish that out if you haven't already. So homework 3 is just solving inequalities and writing an interval notation. Okay, I'm gonna pass this out. This is, and I'll explain it in a minute. This is how you access the online book. Did Ms. Rice give you that? So you can still use that. Did I give everybody the sheet? Okay, I'll explain that in a second. All right, so let's go ahead and work through it. First step would be to distribute the positive 6 so 30 plus 8p is greater than 6p plus 24 plus 5p. Now you're going to combine your like terms. So that would be these two. And when you add those two together, you get 11p plus 24. All right, so now what are you gonna do? Yeah, I'm gonna subtract the 11. You can subtract the 8. But I'm gonna subtract the 11 because I wanna keep my variable on the left. So then that'll give me 30 minus 3p is greater than 24. And now I need to subtract that 30. So negative 3p is greater than negative 6. And your last step, because I have to divide by a negative, my last step would be to flip the sign. So p becomes less than, and what's negative 6 divided by negative 3? Positive 2. So I'm gonna go back and graph it. So that means on the number 2, I'm gonna put an open or a closed circle. What do I use? Open circle. And then it's, what is it? Less than, so it's gonna go to the left. So this is my negative infinity. So my interval would be negative infinity to 2, and they both get parentheses. All right, any questions about that lesson? Okay, so you also have, I just passed out the online book code. Okay, so the directions of how to get to the book online, for those of you don't have to carry your book. The first thing you need to do is write down the course, where it says course ID. Go ahead and write this down here. Write this on that blank and write it bigger. So it's my name, Bryant, and it's 32628, all lowercase. That's the course name, or it's course ID. Go ahead and write that down, and then you can go ahead and follow those instructions so you can access the book virtually. All right, use this time to either finish up homework 2 or start homework